This is Growth Guide, a podcast exploring the depths of curiosity, questioning everything in the name of growth. I'm your host, Brian D'Alessandro. My guest today is the bitingly funny Steve Faktor. Steve's an innovator, futurist, and digital commerce expert. He brings a welcome, sharp, and witty perspective to the field. Steve does things. He's a sought-after keynote speaker given the stage by the likes of CFO Magazine, New York University, and Harvard, to name a few. He's the author of Econovation, and as Managing Director of IdeaFaktory, he consults with companies like American Express and Citi, where he accelerates growth by partnering with top startups, developing new innovations, and restructuring for growth. Steve also hosts the McFuture Podcast, which delivers insights on innovation that make you laugh, so you don't have to cry. All of this has led Steve to the realization that most corporate Americans, including himself, have become institutionalized by their jobs. Stick around as he guides us, pitchfork and all, from breaking free of this terrible trap. Now, I know Steve from prestigious circles, like the basement gym of our old New York City apartment building. We bicker like an old married couple on topics like finding purpose, avoiding death by administration, suburban despair, cashing in on his Ukrainian heritage, and more. This is an action-packed episode, so let's get at it. Starting with getting Steve all revved up because he thinks I forgot to give him a proper intro. Ladies and gentlemen, Steve Faktor. Steve, thanks so much for joining on the show. It's great to reconnect with you.
I'm assuming you're going to do a full illustrious introduction when you do the full episode. I mean,
no, that's it. That's all you get, man.
That's it? That sucks. I mean, I mean, not to critique your podcast, but come on, you could do a little better than that, pull up a LinkedIn or something. You could leave me complaining about your introduction in your podcast.
Oh man. Well, Steve, it's great to be chatting. So Steve and I lived in New York.
You don't have to announce the address where we live. Come
on. You're not there anymore.
You want people to pass the test of where, that test that they give you for when you're applying for credit. It's like, which of the following three addresses have you lived in? Why are you trying to make it easy for me? Bleep that shit out. I don't want it on there. Don't tell people where we lived.
I think there's good context. So Steve and I met in the gym. We'll probably get into talking about relationships and, the challenge for finding meaningful relationships.
And one of us clearly is still in the gym.
Let's see, where do we want to jump in? I mean, you and I never have any challenge of finding topics. I think last we were talking about, related to this, the challenges of the modern day workforce and working from home.
Yeah. I mean, do you want me to just aimlessly rant about it, or?
You're great at that.
Yeah, it's my gift. It's a problem. I think the people who do well with that stuff are people who are probably established and also are pretty disciplined, and, they're employees. Anyone who's starting something new is going to have problems building rapport, building connections, building those networks that you need to get things off the ground. So I think it's, there's definitely, sort of in the same way that the pandemic sacrificed the young for the old, because it really wasn't very deadly to young, healthy people, and it was to older and sicker people, but everyone was equally locked down. The same thing is happening with this work from home thing, where it trades the benefits for, let's say, married couples or established workers, gives them more benefits than people who probably would benefit from some FaceTime in the office with senior executives, or people who maybe want to put in the extra time, things that aren't necessarily measurable on digital conversations. So I think there's going to be a lot of rejiggering of the economy in favor of establishment players, as if they needed more favors. So I think that that's kind of the direction this goes, and I think or I'm hoping that new networks start to form. You see people kind of reshuffling to different places like Austin. So a lot of San Francisco people went there. A lot of New York people went to Miami. Although I can't imagine anyone being that innovative in Miami. Like the closer you are to the equator and to bikinis, how motivated are you going to be to go, hey, you know what? We should be indoors hashing this stuff out on a whiteboard.
It's
So,
interesting.
yeah.
It's a very New Yorker way of seeing it, which I held the same way, right? We see palm trees and all of a sudden it's vacation mode. But when you're living in that environment, you need that creative tension of the opposite in order to see it that way. And so when it becomes normalized, you don't. I've seen myself getting into that habit where I could just be indoors the whole week, and then the weekend comes like, oh wow, this is around me. And so it's a tricky one. You have to keep on reminding yourself, oh, my friends in New York right now are suffering the brutal cold and the freezing rain that's coming down. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's a funny one. But look, with Miami, it's been interesting since I moved here. It's definitely, got the old Miami thing going on, but it's also this new creative blender that's spinning, and it's very exciting. It's optimistic. There's a lot of youth here that is involved in adding the energy to it. And I do see there's definitely, I think this also goes into just the state response to the pandemic and it being a more free state, shall we say. People are meeting in person and have been this whole time. And that's a big part of it. The fact that people are socializing in person, I think, feeds the activity a lot. And, as you're talking about, I think, yeah, especially our youth that are entering into the workforce, what I'm seeing is they're adopting a lot of what I call worst practices, right? They're not learning the standard operating procedures and best practices that you need as a foundation, regardless of where you studied and what skills you've gotten from university. Real life experience is very different, and having that in a social work setting is very different than the virtual setting where the boss you're sitting across from is in their shorts or underwear, and it just has a very different thing going on.
Yeah, and has like a world map animated behind him.
Yeah, you have all types of crazy people with crazy backgrounds, right?
Yeah, well, it's funny. I think of it in terms of, because a lot of people try to sell me on different cities, because I've been toying around with moving different places, and one of the places that kept coming up obviously is Austin. Austin, I've been there before the pandemic. I think for the first time, maybe 2018 or 2019. It really is fine. It's fine. It's very livable. But if you want to be the best at X, name me the X that you would go to Austin for. There is nothing. So if you want to be the best in
Tesla.
finance, no, Tesla just announced that they're moving their engineering division back to California. So maybe their corporate offices are still in Texas, but bottom line is, and Tesla's not an industry. I'm saying if you want to be at the top of finance, you want to be at the top of fashion, you want to be at the top of whatever, maybe even like marketing, you go to New York. You want to be at the top of Hollywood, or some sort of entertainment field, or startups, you go to California, San Francisco, or LA. What is going to be a place that is known for something? I mean, Miami, great for beaches and blow. It's always been great for that. Can you blend it with enough new people to turn it into something else is the question. And will it be the best at that other thing, or will it just dilute everything and just we won't have a best anymore because the best will be fragmented?
Yeah, I think that's what it's more of. It's more of a decentralized time that we're moving into. And as such, you're not going to have these flagship cities where they're a powerhouse for everything. I think there's much more distribution, because even when you look at Manhattan now, it's not what it was. And the question is, right, what is it going to look like moving forward? I think we're going to have more of this decentralization. There's going to be a bit of this here, a bit of this there. And as the workforce is decentralized, we'll see how that all plays out. But that's also taking it away from needing a physical headquarter. Yeah,
But that's another bullshit cost saving thing, and that's,
Sure.
so we don't need a headquarters. Oh, yeah, that's great. But you also lose out, so I wrote a piece a while back called The Collision Theory of Innovation. And my thesis is that innovation relies on the frequency and the quality of collisions of people, of ideas, of all kinds of things, but people and ideas primarily. And when you dissipate, that's why nothing great happens in the suburbs. It can't. I mean, once in a blue moon, but just to marshal any resources to push something new out in a diffuse environment is almost impossible. That's why most great innovations came from clusters of artists, clusters of people. There's a reason why all these artists in the 1800s moved to France to all be in sort of a community, because that community kind of propelled itself. You could say this is something similar maybe for podcasting in the last 7 to 10 years in California around Joe Rogan. You can say that San Francisco with startups was like that. You had these clusters of people creating new things without the frequency and the quality of innovation, because you could have one without the other and still be crappy. You could bump into a lot of dumb people and still produce nothing.
And I would add one more to that duo is diversity. And then
diversity, yeah.
And then the other ingredient I would add that overarches this is there needs to be a shared purpose and a sense of urgency, right? That's what drives innovation at its best. And when that sense of urgency exists, that allows people to come together and unite in ways they normally wouldn't. And so if we look at the suburbs, right, as a counter to that, right, versus the old coffee houses of the 1800s, and look back at the obviously the Medici effect, right, and the Renaissance, the suburbs is predicated upon separation, right? If I take it in the most reductive form, it is about being able to be in my big house, my McMansion, to tie into your McFuture show, to have a drive-through for my bank, for my Starbucks, and be able to wave to the people I quote unquote know and am friends with, but always at a distance, right? It's like it's the big stiff arm. And so there's this separation that people start feeling acclimated to. And in fact, they're fed that in all ways, right? Our consumption feeds that. Our social media, our rankings in education and school, it's not about socialization. It's about competition in a way that we're going to judge everything based on quantifiable numbers. And when it becomes that game, it's about winning or losing. And so you're always keeping score. And when score is what you're keeping versus the coming together, right, of innovation as a collaboration, it's a very different game. And in a lot of ways, it's more qualitative before quantitative. The quantitative is the result.
Well, at that point, you are no longer looking for innovation. There's a period in the maturity curve of a person, a country, a company, where you're still looking for new things. You haven't found the thing. You haven't found your cash cow. And the people who have resided here, and when I say here, any suburb, anywhere, have already found their cash cow. They found their thing that's going to, fund the 401k, fund the 2.1 kids and the dog, and, and the Costco runs and the vacations. It's all funded. So once you're there, innovation is a much lower priority, because that need that you were talking about no longer exists. And so you're not solving for X. There's no X anymore. So now you're just sort of optimizing your resources for comfort. And there's nothing wrong with that. But even societally, if everything was going great and everyone was, was happy and there was no discontent and no one was rioting in the streets or in front of the Capitol, then you'd be like, oh, we did it. Maybe we don't need that much innovation. But, given that there's some wars, there's some huge debt in the economy, that people are dissatisfied, you've got all this inequality, you've got all this unrest, then, we obviously haven't solved for it, but don't expect those solutions to come from people who have entered the comfort zone. And are warehousing their kids in the best possible school they can afford or school system.
And now let's zoom out one fractal, right? Because there's within that confine looking for the driver, right, to achieve these goals. Let's look at who's setting
what are the
these
goals? Which goals?
Right. Exactly. So these goals of what you're talking about are of success. So let's look at success, right? If success is achieving, it's always a destination mentality in the US these days, right? It's if I get this, once I have that, then I'll be this. And so the finish line is death here, right? It's congratulations, you made it to retirement. Now you could move into the 55 and over community. And oh, by the way, all of your poor health from all of these decisions has compounded. Now you're going to spend the next 10 years trying to get your health back. And 8 out of 10 times, you're going to die. And the other 2, you're probably not going to be living your best life. And so it's a losing fucking game. And we have to look at that. And my thing is, let's really ask ourselves the question of what does success look like for us individually, right? Then we could look at it collectively. But ask yourself, what does it look like, and define that on your own terms. Now, the vast majority of people have no desire to do it. A lot don't have the ability to do it. And it's a terrifying thing because it rips the rug out from your feet. It's a very destructive and transformative event that most don't willingly choose to go for. But what I would say is, on the other side of that, if you are bold enough to try, well, you could be freed from this idea of success that leads ultimately to dis-ease and separation.
I think I can simplify what you're saying in a way that might advance our cause here, which is people are uncomfortable with change in general, and change is what's necessary to achieve great things.
Let's talk about why real quickly.
Hold your thought 1 second. Let me just finish this last sentence, and then we'll jump into what you were saying. Most people are not necessarily wired for that type of achievement. So their settings are different of what they consider success, and their success doesn't necessarily require a great deal of change. If you're happy being a postal worker in the same community that you grew up in as a child, and then living in the same house that you lived in as a child, then you're going to be fine. You don't have to break your neck trying to change. You have to move to another city to be the best of the best in the mail delivery community.
It's interesting, right? Even the examples of this person's life that you're referencing are still looking at the standards that society poses, right? What is your career, right? How much are you making from that? But I think when we look at success and start seeing, oh, it's what is my civic duty that I've provided? How was I service to others, right? What was my involvement in my family or in my church or temple or whatever it is? There are these more meaningful measurements that, when we look at, it's easy on paper to say, oh, this person, they didn't really amount to much, but that's part of the whole thing.
Yes, but the two things you mentioned are intertwined. So even if your goal in life is to make life as comfortable as possible for your kids or to service your community, there's a level of capital you need in order to do that, right? So if you want your kid to go to the best school system, you might want to try to afford a better house for better or worse. That's the way the system works. Yes, we could talk about all the ways in which the system is broken. It shouldn't be that way. I agree. However, at the moment, very few individuals have the ability, or if any, to change that reality. So now you have to operate within it. And if you are operating within it, you have to say, okay, well, if I want the best for my kids, then maybe I need to work harder and earn more so I can move into this other community that has a better school that can give my kid a better chance at a better college and maybe a better future. So that mechanism is built in, and it's inseparable. Capitalism is inseparable from Americanism. And I have to tell you, even capitalism is inseparable from socialism. It's just a different kind of capital. It's just social capital instead of money capital. But it's the same thing, because you put yourself in positions of increasing power, authority, and influence in order to get the things that you want. So it's no longer tied to output and how many widgets you can sell, or how big you can make your organization. But now it's tied to how many people you know and how many favors you can do, and where you can kind of maneuver the gears of the system to get the things that you want for your family, for whoever. So it's all capitalism. It's just a matter of which kind of capital we're dealing with. And so it's, in my view, inescapable to some extent. I mean, yeah, maybe if you have enough money and comfort, you can opt out, and that's awesome. But I don't know too many people percentage-wise who can opt out.
Yeah, no, that's definitely the minority. And I agree with what you're saying. It's a matter of how do you shift the relationship to that so that you're not a slave to it, but instead seeing it and utilizing it as an energy supply, but doing it with a very clear intention and will in which to do it from.
Are people that, what sort I'm looking for, not thoughtful, but are people that deliberate in their planning and thinking about their own future and aspirations? I don't know that they are. I don't think people are even taught to do that.
Well, I think that's the key. They're not taught to do that. The same thing when you brought up something that I've said myself and millions of other people have said is, oh yeah, people don't like change. Well, let's look at that. Why don't they like change? I don't think that humans inherently don't like change. Humans are fucking incredible at change. They are so radically adaptive. Look at our earlier civilizations. They were dealing with a lot of change, especially when you look at nomadic civilizations. I think in our current day and age, we are not wired for a change. I think our nervous systems are not wired for it. Our neurology is not wired for it. And if you look at why, it becomes a really interesting question.
Well, I think change is tethered to necessity. And when you take a lot of necessity out of the equation, as we have for a lot of people, there are a lot of people who are very comfortable. I see them inside of Costco, waddling down the aisles. They've had enough. There should be a treadmill in there, and not a gross of cookies in the cart. But that's the thing. Once you lack a certain level of desire and need, then desire is good too. So those two things. So it's either need or desire. And there are people I know personally who are so hungry for success or money or whatever. They will find a way. They will always find a way. They'll find a hustle, they'll find whatever, and they'll get to that next thing because it's just sort of wired into them. So those people aren't operating out of need. You mentioned earlier, there's a ton of innovation happening in places like India, where there are a lot of poor people. I remember seeing some story where they figured out how, there were these people living sort of these cave-like settings where there was no light, and they found a way to use water bottles to reflect the light that's coming in through these holes and illuminate their shelter. And it's pretty amazing. But again, that's pure necessity. And so when you take that out of the equation, and also most people are not wired for that hunger that I mentioned earlier, the ones left over are going to be pacified very quickly, and they don't have the need to change. And change is hard, especially, I'm not talking about change like I'm going to repaint the house, although that too could be like a hassle. It's like, oh, I got to move all the furniture, I got to lay all the stuff down.
Yeah, you're probably going to hire someone to do that too, right?
Right. And if you could throw the money at the situation, it takes away some of that pain. But that goes back to the capitalist grind that you said, like, hey, reset yourself. Well, what if you can't? And now, there's one guy who can throw money money at the problem, right? He could get a sitter. He can get some guy to come paint the house. He could get someone to watch the dog when he's away. Like that person is going to be fine. And they've outsourced all their chores. And then the other person who hasn't has to do that entire grind, has to do all his own Home Depot runs and figure out what the right paint color is and figure out how to not mess up his floors and all that. So yeah, those are two lives, both probably middle class and probably by world standards, upper class. but in reality, it's, both of those situations, you can make an argument, take away a lot of that need for change. And so you can be very well taken care of and pacified eating chips, watching Netflix.
As many are, right? Or at least they think they are. But, I always play the game of fast forward to the deathbed. And when they're looking back, what are they reflecting on? Are they talking about the series
Did they
on Netflix?
purchase the deathbed at Costco on sale?
Yes, and it has a built-in soul massager.
Is it a Kiss coffin? I think that's available. I don't know that I want to project this level of depth onto people that may not exist. And like I'll look at TikTok every once in a while because I've been posting some of my short videos on TikTok. I've been posting on YouTube or on YouTube Shorts and Instagram Reels. And every once in a while I'll flip through what else is on there. My God, to project introspection onto the people and maybe that's okay. No, I don't want everyone to be deep and ponderous. And, there's a lot of people, especially now. I saw a statistic the other day that girls, especially young girls, teen girls, are depressed and contemplating suicide. And more so than ever historically. Mm-hmm. And, it makes sense. All these negative narratives, all of this, kind of, whether it's climate stuff or cultural stuff. And, and they're trying to do good things, I guess. They're trying to be good people, but also not a lot is being asked of them, right? Because that need isn't there. So they're manufacturing a lot of that need, and a lot of the manufactured need is unsatisfying. If you're going to yell at your parents about the wrong pronouns, you've picked a stupid fight. You're like even if you're right, even if you're right that yes, you should have called my friend a Zer, maybe that is the correct thing, but it's a manufactured need in the grand scheme of things. And so I'm saying all of those things, all of those narratives, all of create agitation, depression, and negative narratives that people are, young people especially, are having trouble carrying with them, and it's manifesting all kinds of negative ways. And I think we've now started to celebrate mental illness and the acknowledgement of mental illness, but not the overcoming it. So now it's, it's like, let's, we're all crazy. Let's wallow in it. Let's admit and let's celebrate.
Well, it's good business. It's good business.
It's great business
to do that. Right. And so I said, what about looking at the causal aspect of it? Right. I mean, even to the fact where there's conversation about, guns are terrible, they should be removed. Guys, guns have been around forever, and I'm not taking a stance one way or another on this, but guns have been around.
Oh, sure you are. I see you holding a Luger there.
Exactly. They've been around as long as this country and before, but school shootings have not been, right? And so if we ask that simple question, why specifically concentrated in this country? Yes, we see it in other Western, influenced countries, but I think that's also the source of it, right? It's coming from that. And so we're not, as a society, truly deeply looking at that and trying to solve for that. And it's happening again and again on a weekly or even a daily basis a lot of times. And, the fact that this isn't front and center on news is just obscene. And that's where I go to it being less about the individual of not being so introspective or having these other narratives, but more about who is shaping these narratives and who is dishing them out.
Yeah, I think there's a couple of things, well, more than a couple. There's a lot of things happening at once that are contributing to this. I think there's just been a general And I honestly, I can't tell if it's been a degradation in education and critical thinking, or social media and everyone having a forum has just exposed how ignorant people are. And maybe it's a combination of the two. So maybe we're just seeing more of it. But what at least we know about now is the people are not doing well. Before the Ukraine war, what percentage of Americans of any age, let's say 13 and up, could find Ukraine on a map, do you think? Unmarked. Yeah, let's say you marked everything except for Europe. What percentage?
Oh, I would say 2 to 3%.
2 to 3%. Now you have Ukraine flags on everything. So I'm Ukrainian. So it's great. And this is the first. It makes you wish you were single. It's like, hey, the one time being Ukrainian could actually get you laid. That's never existed in the history of mankind. No one's walked into a bar and said, hey, I'm Ukrainian. And a girl goes, really? Wow. That has never happened in the history of the world, including in Ukraine. So, point is that we have dumbed ourselves down to such an extent now, or maybe we've always been that way. I can't tell for sure.
No, I don't think it's that we always have. I think there have always been the followers, right? Or the sheeple, as it's referred to. And these are people who are stuck in a fear state, right? I don't believe that it's innate and that it can't be overcome, but I think it's a lifetime of work to break out of that cycle. I asked the question of, when we say we're being dumbed down, who is initiating dumbing us down? Because all of this is shaped and handed out. The story is written and served.
Look, I don't think if you're someone who is in a position of power or authority or influence and you're successful, you want to answer a lot of questions, right? You don't want to be held accountable by a bunch of underlings questioning your authority or questioning your status.
In fact, you don't have to, right?
Right.
That's the key.
So the mechanism that you describe is inbuilt to any kind of success or prominence or wealth or whatever. So the mechanism to say, hey, I don't want you asking questions, which is another way of saying I don't want you thinking critically, is built in to authority or the construct of authority to begin with.
I think you're spot on there. And if we look at our old friend Edward Bernays, right, who is the father of PR,
beer and mayonnaise, the combination of beer and mayonnaise, which is delicious.
He was the nephew, second over of Sigmund Freud, and he leveraged all of his work to create the modern marketing world, called sometimes the father of PR. I think it's more the father of propaganda. And in fact, he used that to influence our population, and that's never stopped. He developed, here, I'll read a clip I have here. So he developed an approach he dubbed the engineering of consent. He provided leaders the means to control and regiment the masses according to our will without their knowing about it. To do so, it was necessary to appeal not to the rational part of the mind, but the unconscious. So this is the seed and the birth of modern marketing, and we've seen how far that's come over the past, 75 years. And it has only gotten, more empirical in the data. And
it's also systematic now with social media and programmatic ads.
And you have all of these layers of extensions that are wielding this know-how, and it's a very, very effective tool.
Yeah. Is it any less or more effective than religion? It's similar.
Oh, there's definitely similarities. I think where religion was using the fear of God to control, this is using the manipulation of the human psyche.
Both are manipulating the human psyche. The human psyche wants hope. The human psyche wants, people want love. People want hope. People want, they want to aspire to something. And if you can't have any of it in this material world, then someone's going to promise it to you in the other world.
Yeah, here's one major difference I see, right? religion is doing it in fear of the almighty creator, right? And those who are set as the middlemen of the creator and them, right? So that's all right. That's something larger than self. Can't argue with that. The latter is dealing with psychological separation between other humans and other individuals. And so it's much more degrading to the social fabric. And that's where we see this separatist destruction that has taken place. And, I listened to your episode that you released on loneliness, right? And I think, this inability to have meaningful friendships. And I think this all fits in right here. I'm going to pass it over to you, but I just want to read this other blurb I had pulled from Edward Bernays. The conscious and intelligent manipulation of the organized habits and opinions of the masses is an important element in democratic society. Those who manipulate this unseen mechanism of society constitute an invisible government, which is the true ruling power of our country. We are governed, our minds are molded, our tastes formed, and our ideas suggested largely by men we have never heard of. It is they who pull the wires that control the public mind. So you could look at that and be like, oh my God, that's so out there, that's conspiracy. The reality is these are the conversations of the people who are on that side of the table. That's where I focus on people. It's time to wake ourselves up and to get into the discomfort of change, because the alternative is far more terrifying.
Depending on the person, so I think what he's alluding to is a sort of prison of the mind, which is a very tough one to break out of, because you're basically the prisoner and the warden of your own potential. And you end up essentially limiting yourself in ways that the world isn't limiting you, but you are limiting yourself, and now not achieving your maximum potential, whatever that potential may be, whatever it is that you aspire to. But the part we're not teaching is what to aspire to. Like there's a lot of people who don't have something that they want. Maybe some people just want out, right? They want out of a bad situation, maybe an abusive environment or family, or a shitty neighborhood, or some sort of violence, or whatever. In fact, I was listening to a podcast interview with J.K. Rowling the other day, and she was talking about how she was in this abusive relationship before she, kind of hit it big with the book. And so she had to like escape. Like the guy kept the pages of the book, of the Harry Potter book that she was writing, hostage. So she had to like sneak them out a few at a time so she could photocopy them and keep them somewhere else, so she could eventually escape. So, so there are people caught up in all of these screwed up situations. But I don't think our education system, which is essentially an assembly line type of model, cranking out a bunch of good little workers for maybe a world that doesn't quite need them anymore, and not in the same way.
And they're expendable regardless.
Everyone's expendable. Even CEOs are expendable. This is the thing. As institutions get larger, everyone becomes fractionally less important. And so, things start to take on a momentum of their own, and there's no one individual. Think of all the CEOs that have been fired, or like Jeff Bezos built this giant machine, steps down, another guy takes over, Andy Jassy, and things keep moving. These things are so huge and monstrous as entities. No one's gonna, Joe Biden, we could sit around going, or Trump, look at all the control and power, whatever. No, these things have, there are people working in these government agencies that are steeped in this stuff, and all this stuff runs at a level of detail that no leader is even going to delve into, and so to think that any one person makes that much of a difference, yeah, I think it's part of, especially in America, we told ourselves like this sort of, like this hero, we have this kind of hero arc, that the hero's journey, and we think that this one person is going to rise to power and lead us to the promised land. No, it doesn't work that way. I mean, I think it didn't work in biblical times, or maybe not that great, and it doesn't work in American politics. You have people with much more power in other countries, but even they're kind of limited. Like even I remember Mike Bloomberg got a lot of shit after an interview where he said that Xi in China is accountable to his people, and everyone's like, yeah, right, yeah, he's an autocrat. And I'm like, yes, he's not accountable in the same way that an American leader who could be voted out would be, but he's accountable. You saw what was happening in China with people protesting and pushing back against the regime. It's a very tenuous thing. When you've got 1 billion people, you could only crush so many bodies before they overwhelm you. So they have to maintain a level of control. So yes, they're not accountable in the same way. And look at the same thing in Iran. Same thing is happening. Women are like, no, we don't want this anymore. Other people are, taking to the streets to support them. So you're never going to have this complete unaccountability of power. There is some account, there is a level that maybe their threshold is much higher in terms of what needs to happen or go wrong before people revolt. So what I'm saying is that even those leaders, even in what we would think are absolute power situations, are expendable to some degree and at some point. So my point is that there are constraints, and yes, as things get bigger, organizations get bigger, we matter less. It's same thing. The US population is growing, our number of representatives is staying the same, so we are fractionally less represented every single day that goes on. Every time there's a baby born, there's whatever, and the population ticks up and the census ticks up, we are less represented.
And then add on top of it, on that same trajectory is the more consumed we get with other things, whether it be work, social media, or dealing with our poor health, the less time we have to be involved in our government and the less impact we have.
Well, the thing that I think is really nefarious that no one ever thinks about is this death by administration that's happening. A lot of people are now like, you're not only are you doing your own checkout at the store, but you're doing your own travel booking. You're doing your own, you're doing your own taxes. You're doing like the amount of time that is necessary just to manage all of the vendors in your life. The cell phone provider, go sit on hold with AT&T for an hour, or Comcast, or any of these organizations. So the amount of time that is stolen in administration. But by the way, I think that's the greatest argument for marriage. Like, forget about all the romantic stuff. Like, just being able to split hold time with Comcast, that alone is a great argument for getting married. But people who are single and have, and what I don't get is, now I'm a pet owner for the first time. I have a dog. It is so much work. And the people in the city I know who have dogs and they live by themselves, I'm like, what are you doing? Like, you're taking on this extra level of administration. Life is hard enough. It's hard enough to be single and dating and socializing and working and doing all your administrative stuff. And then on top of it, taking care of this animal and being by yourself. Like that is crazy to me. And we are losing so much time to administration. I wrote a piece a few years ago about how taxes steal dreams. So the companies, Intuit, which owns TurboTax, and H&R Block, and all these tax preparers, they spend millions of dollars every single year lobbying to keep the tax code complex, because that's the only way they're going to sell their shitty software. So they're essentially hurting Americans. They are stealing time from Americans. And the reason I know that is you look at all these other developed, sane countries where they send you your your tax return on a postcard, because all the information is available. They know everything's based on your social security number. They know how much you earned at your job. They know how much is stored in your bank accounts and how much interest was earned. All they have to do is just send you a card that says, hey, does this look correct? Which is exactly what they do in Europe in most countries. You say yes, you sign the thing and you send it. Now it's all digital. So no time spent. And here, hours and weeks spent on bullshit and audits and all kinds of nonsense. Time is being stolen from people. I could almost rationalize money being stolen before time being stolen. And so I think that is a huge crime that no one is addressing.
Yeah, well, that's also, I mean, that just speaks to the larger divide and the beauty of the design of that game and that system, right? It's terrible for those who are struggling to, keep it anywhere in the upper middle class and below. And then anyone who's in the true upper class, they use the system as a way to avoid all types of charges and
they've got people
maximize
to
their
do all
earnings.
that stuff.
They have full
Yeah.
teams that speak the language. Look, the language is complex, like you said, and foreign for a reason. Same thing goes with legal language, which was, the Queen's English that was, the root of our language here was used for a reason. It's to dumb down in a different way. The language was really about the legal terms before. They made it so complex for us because we don't learn it. And in fact, we learn a very dumbed down version of it. So I think this dumbing down of societies is a very old thing. The methods have just evolved as new technologies have arisen, as the population has grown, and as globalization has truly linked it all together. It's a big one. And I think it doesn't just get stuck to the admin. It's really the larger design of all of it to keep us so busy without actually making any real progress.
Yeah. I think we're obviously prone to being pacified, but I also think we're now in a very slow process of educating ourselves about all these things. And a while back, I think it was right after Trump got elected, I did an episode on the podcast, The McFuture. Check it out. You got to do the plugs. I talked about, I think the title was 10 Reasons You Will Agree Trump Will Make Us Great Again. And none of them have to do with anything that Trump actually does or willfully is trying to do. What it had to do with is what an agent of chaos can actually kick up in the shitstorm that is created in his wake. And that's exactly what's happened. So the service that he performed is exposing media's willingness to lie, exposing what the government is willing to do and corporations are willing to do in collusion with each other, exposing these pockets of power. So the question is, what do you do about it? So I think people are slowly starting to wake up. And I think still a lot of people, especially successful ones for whom the system has worked out, are able to cling to old institutions like the New York Times, like Harvard, like, whatever's worked for them, like, corporate America. It's fine. There's no reason for them to question it because it's worked for them. And so they still trust the systems and they have no incentive to look outside of it. But those of us who've peeked outside, we're like, oh man, look at what's going on. I remember there's this woman, a really nice woman I was friendly with. She was, I guess, a speaker also at this event I was speaking at, maybe 2013, somewhere around there. And we were going to the speaker dinner the night before. And on the way down to the restaurant, she asked me, well, what's your talk going to be about? And I'm like, oh, about all these things that are sort of breaking beneath the surface of our society, housing, healthcare, education, like all the stuff and all of this unrest that's bubbling beneath the surface. I can tell you, I have never seen a more blank stare on a human being than the response I got from her. I mean, I didn't have the charts and everything to back up the stuff that I would do the next day, but she lived in the world. She lived in the suburbs of Boston, and she, her kid goes to a nice school. She works a nice corporate job. She has all the benefits, owns a house. Everything is fine. everything is fine. She had no incentive to even understand the words I was saying. Forget about the concepts. Like just nothing. It was the blankest stare I've ever seen. And by the way, everything I talked about in that speech the next day was what kicked up and elected Trump and swept him into office and almost made Bernie the nominee on the left.
And I think it goes even further than just the blank stare. It's more the you can't wake someone who's pretending to be asleep. I think it's more of like a death fear, like, oh shit, he's talking about the stuff that we shouldn't, like, just let sleeping dogs lie, like everything's cool, let's not rock the boat, like we don't talk about that. And it becomes this thing like in the Matrix when the Matrix notices, recognizes that he's there, his presence, and everything just turns to it. That's like the feeling I get when it goes there. But people know, they always know, they know it's not really
they
working.
Know the boundaries of what they shouldn't question. It's the same thing with religion. People start to get very uncomfortable if you start going, well, how could a guy come back from the dead? That's you're not gonna win a lot of friends with that one. People are gonna push back because they know that the thing they believe is a thing of faith and probably doesn't stand up to a lot of critical inquiry. But it's fine. They've built a life that it gives them comfort. It gives them something to, lean on in hard times, whatever, however it is that they use faith. So I don't judge that. And I think that everything else has become a faith. An episode I'd recommend for my podcast is called The Future is Belief. And I actually think that we're not moving away from belief and faith. We're moving deeper into it. It's just manifesting itself differently in different ways. Your belief in Bitcoin or yoga or meditation or veganism or climate, whatever, I've identified like 48 different religions or pseudo religions. They behave exactly the same way. They tap into some of the same characteristics that faith used to tap into. It's just that we need new stories. So these are the new narratives that people are willing to accept and want to accept because they still need the beliefs. They just aren't happy with the old stories anymore. But I think we're moving deeper into that. I think it's more belief. And so, the idea that you can change someone's mind with facts and charts, no. To go back to Bernays, you actually have to the only way to defeat a belief system or a dogma is replace it with another dogma, and hopefully one that is at least slightly more beneficial than the last one. So if the last one required you to burn witches at the stake and the new one only has you poke them a little bit with toothpicks, that's an upgrade. Still not great. Still probably shouldn't be poking them. And chances are they're not really witches, but at least they're going to live, right? So before you went from burning, now a little toothpick poking, I would say that's an upgrade. Not a great upgrade, not a huge upgrade. An upgrade. So I'm saying if we can move you from like a deadly dogma to not deadly dogma, that's a win. So I think that is the path, and the path is to use the same marketing jujitsu for good things that we use for destructive things, like consuming sugar or whatever. By the way, that is a whole can of worms that I don't know if we want to open up.
I think what you're saying is absolutely correct. It's we have to pick up those same tools that might be used nefariously and wield them with positive intention. And I believe in order to do that, we have to do the individual work, the introspective work, to get clear on what our values are, what our purpose is, what our definitions of things like success and love and contribution are, and then we can go forth.
I was thinking about this the other day. I think I tweeted something like, why are there no benevolent conspiracy theories? Why is there never a moral mastermind who's trying to create a candy cane forest, but instead of sugar, it's made with stevia? Like why isn't someone trying to mastermind or being suspected of masterminding something good? because the people prone to masterminding, or the people prone to seeking power or fame or anything of scale, are typically not the kind of people who want good things for people. They have a very heavy self-interest first and foremost, and that's okay.
And control is often a driver there.
Control, influence, money, power, all those things. And so then, because a good question to ask that no one's asking, I keep bringing this up, but maybe someone will eventually run with it and go, or actually someone is running with it. I'll get to that in a second. But I did a rant on one of my episodes about all of these power hungry septuagenarians. Like, can you imagine someone asked you a question, said, hey, how do you plan to spend your 70s? And your answer is clinging to power? Like, that is a deranged person. That is a psychopath of the highest order. And so whether it's Putin, or whether it's Biden, or whether it's Pelosi or McConnell, these old farts clinging to power in their 70s and 80s, these are psychopaths. They are psychopaths. And the fact that we're not asking questions, and sort of Nikki Haley, she just announced that she's running, and she sort of brought it up. She's like, we should have a competence test. No, we should have a psychopathy test. We should have a psychoanalysis of people who want power at that age. And by the way, I don't think Nikki Haley would pass that test either. So let's not give her
unless
undue
she's
credit.
The one who's designing it, right? And
right. I don't know who's going to design it. I'm just saying that the pursuit of power is intertwined with some sort of psychopathy. The question is it a psychopathy that we can deal with, that maybe could yield benefit for people, or not? But there is something that is abnormal about saying, hey, I think I could lead these people. Like there's something there that is not normal, and wanting dominion over others is not a normal impulse.
It's certainly not a healthy one.
No, not a healthy one. And maybe it can be benevolent, so I would make the argument that, having lived in New York under Michael Bloomberg, I would say he's a benevolent psychopath. So he's a guy who didn't need the bullshit. Like, once you're a billionaire, what the hell do you need the nonsense of being mayor and dealing with all the minutia and the garbage, literally the garbage of society? He has to go negotiate with the garbage unions and the mob and all this other stuff. So why would you want that? Why would you put yourself in a position to do that when you could have the life, any kind of life? He is a psychopath.
Well, yeah, I think the position buys you other things.
But what is there left to buy?
That's the thing. The mere nature that you want those other forms of power goes right back to it.
That's a pure distillation of psychopathy, because every one of his other needs isn't just taken care of. It is at a point where he can take care of the needs of small nations.
Yeah,
generational. He could feed Zimbabwe, like, or some, I don't know, Chad, some starving country. Like, he doesn't need to do any of this stuff. And so my point is that is psychopathy. And I now that's a long way of giving him a compliment. That is the
if you're listening, Mike,
in case you're listening, I still would love to do business with you. But that is a long that is a long way to say he ended up as a very benevolent leader for New York, up until he kind of paid a bunch of people off to let him create the loophole to get elected a third time, to suspend the election. What are those? What do they call that? Term limits. Yeah. So until then, he was great. He was a really good mayor. And yeah, I know people gripe about certain things, and yeah, I'm sure he could have been better in some things and failed at others. But generally speaking, quality of life was really good. The city was safe. We
got all the bike lanes.
In fact, it was so well run, the imbecile that followed him, de Blasio, couldn't even destroy it. And he was trying. I've never seen a guy try to destroy something good so,
Voraciously.
systematically. Yeah, he was determined. The guy was determined to destroy it and still kind of couldn't. Yeah, he messed up a few things, but it was so idiot proof that the biggest idiot we could find could not ruin it. So that's impressive. So Mike Bloomberg, you might be a psychopath, but you're my psychopath. So that's an example. But you're not always going to luck out. You're not going to always find someone who is able to overcome the nature of power. And the nature of power is dominion over others.
Well, Mike, you could find Steve's contact down in the comments below. Steve, always a pleasure.
Yeah, this was fun.
Thanks for joining us this week on Growth Guide. A big thanks to our sponsors. This episode is sponsored by the Permaculture Education Institute. You may have listened to the episode I did with founder Morag Gamble. She's incredibly knowledgeable in permaculture practices and communes with nature on the deepest of levels. The conversation we had revealed how returning to a healthy relationship with nature brings us internal peace and harmony. Whether in schools, prisons, on farms, or in our backyards, the result's always the same. Morag devotes her life to restoring our soil and enriching community. Whether you're looking to level up an established career or into community farming, or being called to this field for your next chapter, the wealth of knowledge and wisdom Morag offers is paramount. This is where the Permaculture Educators program comes in. It's a global online learning community led by Morag Gamble. The program includes dual certificates of permaculture design and permaculture teaching. If you're called to be a part of the positive change growing around the world through living simpler, speaking up, and teaching permaculture, this course is for you. For anyone looking to make permaculture their way of life and their livelihood too. For more information, visit growthguide.love/perma. This episode is sponsored by Morning Man. Live manly, own the morning. I learned about this from UFC champ Frank Shamrock. He was always having trouble getting started in the morning without like 7 or 8 cups of coffee. No exaggeration, I've seen this in person. So he created this product that's packed full of 45 superfoods and it has 95 milligrams of clean caffeine, so you get that charge from the greens and also get a hit from the caffeine without feeling all jacked up. I'm definitely caffeine sensitive and I like this product because it doesn't make me feel like I'm bouncing off the walls, but I feel sharp and energized to get shit done. Visit growthguide.love/morningman to learn more and use promo code GROWTH for 15% off. I'd also like to thank our sponsor, Atmananda Yoga. You guys have got to check out their yoga alignment mat. I've been using this for a long time. As you know by now, I've studied and trained with them as a yoga teacher, and the mat is incredible to deepen your practice and to ensure a lifelong injury-free practice. Visit growthguide.love/alignment for more info or to buy. Be sure to use code GROWTH at checkout for 15% off. Make sure to visit our website, growthguide.love, where you can find freebies, exclusive content, and subscribe to the show so you'll never miss an episode. If you found value in listening, I'd really appreciate a rating on iTunes. I can't tell you just how important this is. Or spread the love. Tell your friends, your fam, heck, tell your spirit animals. And follow me on Instagram at growthguide.love. Be sure to tune in next week for our newest episode.